This is News Guardian. With Greg Aldridge and Chip Tarbun on WFJX Fox Radio 910.
And we're back. As promised, we have candidate for Salem City Council, Maggie Newman. Thank you for coming in this morning.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Maggie, you tell us a little bit about, you have the same election day as our candidates in Roanoke we were just talking about. So what are the issues that you're talking about in Salem right now?
Well, I think a big one is moving elections from May to November. At this point, we have municipal elections in May, and it's costing the city somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 per election to do that. And in the last May election, we had 3% voter turnout. I think consolidating it to November would give us a much better picture of what Salemites actually want, and it would save that taxpayer money.
That's interesting. Roanoke does the same thing. Of course, it has its local elections off cycle for the state and the federal elections, with the exception of Commonwealth's attorney and some of the constitutional offices. They end up having, but city council, that's interesting. City councils have chosen to have their own special election day.
Right.
I wonder if that happens all over Virginia, or if it's just our area.
Well, I think Roanoke at one point had talked about moving theirs as well. I'm not sure where it stands there, but I know the current city council members don't want it moved because they do not want to see party politics involved in their election. I think they like the fact that we have very low voter turnout in May, because when you only have 500 people voting in your election, you can make sure it's 500 of your closest friends or members of your church or whatever, and then you're kind of guaranteed to get back in office.
Now, is that really the voter participation in an average Salem City Council election? 500 people show up to vote?
Well, in the last city council election, we had 3%, which was about 500. The one before that, we had a more heated race, I guess you could say, and we had 14% voter turnout.
Oh, wow.
But if you look at the governor's election, we had 44%, and in the presidential election, we had 72%. So,
wow. So, what other issues are really important that need to be dealt with in Salem right now? Well,
I'm concerned about the recent taxing and spending trend. We've raised a bunch of little city taxes over the last 4 years that I don't feel are necessary. We're increasing spending every year without increasing it where it needs to be increased. Our city employees have not had a raise in years. They were given one raise that was just enough to cover the amount that they were forced to contribute to their own benefits. But it's been probably 7 or 8 years before they've had a real raise. So they're really, when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, making less now than they were 7 or 8 years ago.
Well, and the situation in Roanoke is that City Council gave 4% raises, and in some cases maybe 6% raises to city employees in Roanoke, but gave themselves a 10% raise.
Right.
Wow. So one of the things that I've heard you talk about are property rights issues. And I guess with respect to property rights, one of the biggest things that happened in the Salem area was a new requirement that you license and pay tax and fees for the chickens that the citizens keep in Salem. How does that work, and what's the big problem there?
Well, that actually was what got me to my first city council meeting, was that we had chickens in our backyard. There was a conflict between zoning and city code. One said you can have chickens and here's what you need to do to have them, and then the other one said you can't have chickens in single-family residential areas. So with the conflict, they couldn't really enforce anything, and they decided to ban chickens altogether. And a lot of people were really upset about that because it's a property rights issue. And that's all been taken care of about 2 years ago. They did rewrite city code. Now you have to pay a fee. You have to keep your chickens a certain number of feet away from property lines. You have to submit to animal control comes out and does an inspection to check on your coop and check on where you keep your feed. And they really investigate everything about your chickens. And then they'll have you sign the back of an application pretty much giving away your Fourth Amendment rights, which I feel like is a really big concern. The rest of it I'm willing to deal with, but I will not sign away my Fourth Amendment rights.
So how does that work on the application? What exactly does signing those rights away entail the way they do it?
You're agreeing that they can do random unannounced inspections whenever they want and come into your backyard and check on your coop and check on your chickens and make sure everything's the way they want it to be.
Fantastic. Wow.
Yeah.
And they found the perfect mechanism to do so, because what you can't do in law, you can do through contracts. So I guess that's pretty, as insidious as that is, you have to give them credit for at least figuring out a legal way to break people's Fourth Amendment rights, is by getting them to agree to do so. That's just pathetic.
Right. When we fought it in the city council meeting, they agreed to take it out of the code, but then added it to the application. So you still end up doing the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the actual application there. So can you read that, Greg? Because I mean, it's right there on the application. What is this actually? I think the wording is quite telling.
By signing this statement, the applicant agrees the premises may be inspected at all reasonable times so as to assure the compliance with the conditions outlined herein and in City Code of Salem, Chapter 106. So, fascinating end around of the Constitution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well,
which is you left the best part off.
What?
The Fourth Amendment.
That was my note on there, saying that's something that we need to really look at.
Right.
What, as you've been out talking to people in Salem for this election, what concerns and issues are people bringing to you?
A lot of people feel like they're not being heard. If you ever go to a Salem City Council meeting, more often than not, the vote is always 5-0, and it always feels like everything's been pre-decided. So a lot of people feel like they go into city council and they express their views and they bring information to back up what they're saying, and they're just not listened to.
This is just like listening to somebody talk about Roanoke City Council. I mean, when Roanoke City Council gives away the YMCA building to a bunch of their cronies for $10, it gets a unanimous vote of city council, and Mayor David Bowers smiles from ear to ear and bangs his gavel and says, "Good luck with your project."
Well, about a year ago, Salem City Council decided they wanted to triple their cigarette tax. They wanted to go from 15 cents a pack to 45 cents a pack. And around the same time, Vinton went from, I believe it was 20 cents to 35 cents. And they've just recently decided that was a huge mistake. They've actually lost revenue because of it, because people can drive into Roanoke County and not pay a cigarette tax. And Salem is 14 square miles. There's not a single place in Salem that you can be that you can't get to a convenience store in Roanoke County in less than 10 minutes. I mean, there's just not. So
$5.
For $4.50 a carton, you could save that money and drive into Roanoke County. So, and the problem is, during the meeting, a lot of business owners came to Salem City Council and said, if I lose my cigarette business, I'm also going to lose the coffee and a donut that somebody buys when they come in. I'm also going to lose, the gallon of milk or the lunch that they pick up while they're there. It's not just about the pack of cigarettes. And so I'm interested to see how that tax increase has affected Salem.
Wow. So if someone wants to help for Election Day or donate, how do they find you or get in contact with you? I
think email would be the easiest. It's Newman for Salem City Council at gmail.com. And we need poll workers, and we're still doing door-to-door this weekend, so we could use help with that if anybody's available.
Now, is it true that in Salem you really only have just 3 or 4 precincts for the whole city?
We have 10 precincts, but 3 of them vote in the same location. They all vote at the Salem Civic Center.
Well, that's convenient.
Yeah.
Why couldn't they put all 10 at the Salem Civic Center?
Well, in a city that small, you'd think that they could. But
so there's not a lot to cover. So if you had a reasonable amount of volunteers, you'd be able to be everywhere.
Absolutely.
On Election Day. Yes.
Just tell people a little bit about your background and kind of how you got. I mean, you mentioned that your first city council meeting was about that chicken issue, which you kind of became a little bit famous for that. But tell us a little bit more about your background and what you do and your family and stuff like that.
Actually, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have 5 children. I've been home for almost 15 years now, ever since I was pregnant with my second. I've been very active in the PTA. I've been on the boards at several of the Salem schools and as well as the district board. And then I served on the state legislation and education committee. And it was a nonpartisan group. We lobbied in the General Assembly anytime there was a bill that had to do with K through 12 public education or children, we would kind of get involved in. And that was a very good experience. I really enjoyed what I did there.
Super. All right. So one more time, tell people how to get in contact with you if they want to help.
My email address is Newman for Salem City Council @gmail.com.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks for coming in. It was great to talk to you.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
And good luck.
Thank you.
Chipper?
Well, we come back. Greg has a conspiracy theory for Conspiracy Theory Fridays, and we have some unsolicited advice for Maggie and her campaign.
We do.
Yeah, she doesn't know that, but we have unsolicited advice for her. So.
Okay, when we return to News Guardians on Fox Radio 910.
News Guardians on Fox Radio 910.
The pressure's on. I feel pressure to come up with unsolicited advice now.
It's the same advice we gave before, so it's not really shocking. Because, Maggie makes a great point. And I never really thought about the cost of running these May elections, but she's got a great point about that. I never really put that together, but I think she's 100% right about that. But regardless of that, these city elections have a certain dynamic to them. I believe she's running against two other people who are independents and her. And as a voter, you get two picks. So you walk in the polling place and you want to vote for Maggie. So you vote for Maggie, and then you have one more choice. What should you do with that choice?
Well, it depends. If you've got two candidates you want to see win, you vote for both of them. If you're only there,
but if you're only there because you want Maggie to win.
If you're only there because you want Maggie to win, then you can't vote for anybody other than Maggie, because a vote for another candidate is a vote against her.
Right.
The way it works. I mean, even though you don't mean it to be a vote against her, that's just the way the numbers work.
So you need to leave one of your votes on the table and not cast it. So if you really want Maggie to win, you vote for Maggie and then you walk out. You cast your ballot. It's going to say, you can vote again. No, I'm good. Cast a ballot.
Well, and that's the same advice that we've been giving to people in Roanoke City that want to vote for Valerie Garner or want to vote for Twan or want to vote. I mean, if you showed up because one of those people brought you to the polls to vote for them and you want to see them win, you can't use the other two votes in the Roanoke City Council election because you're voting against the person you went there for. We just learned this from experience, because when we helped Mike Powell 4 years ago, that's what killed us. We brought over 1,000 new people to vote. And it didn't even occur to us at that point that when they showed up that they were going to have two other choices, and they'd probably just vote for the names they recognize the most. And so what ends up happening? Well, you end up with Ray Ferris and Bill Bestpitch.
Right. So there's a reason why they set these elections up the way they do, because it benefits those kinds of guys.